What's going on, everybody? My name is Terminus, and this week we got something very interesting. Apparently, there's not a main episode of Monogatari this week, and as such, we are going to take a look at what's coming out, which is kind of like a half episode. It's named episode 6.5, so I'm not quite sure what to expect, but I do assume it's either gonna be an extra story, or maybe it's gonna be like an epilogue, a second epilogue of our Monogatari story, or it's gonna be possibly also like a preview of what's to come. Don't know exactly. Maybe it's just a general summary of what's happened up until now, though I doubt that. A lot of anime do that, but I think Monogatari probably doesn't. Either way, it's going to be interesting, but before we're starting with whatever this is, we still have one thing left to do from last week, which is checking out the end of the episode. Basically, the epilogue or the punchline, which I didn't do because back then I felt like there was more than enough that we talked about. I didn't want to talk any more about it. I didn't know if this week was going to be an episode or not. And even if it was, it would have been sufficient enough to actually check it out right here and right now. So let's do that. Let's get it on the screen. We have chapter 31 with the end of the Nadeko pool story. And we are going to check out this little thing. It's what you'd call an epilogue. Talk about that is very interesting. Talk about the future that will someday become a memory. Right? We're talking about what's about to come, but someday it's gonna be a memory too. Someday we're gonna look back on it and maybe we'll tell the story. So I don't know where the person who is narrating this, which is Nadeko, is actually right now. If this is future Nadeko telling about it, or if this is current Nadeko writing it down, so it becomes a story one day for a manga maybe and whatnot. And we go in with the egg, Tsukihi, and she's ratting out Nadeko basically, but saying she didn't, right? She's like, I covered for you, don't worry. I said it was Nadeko, please forgive her, teehee. Like, it has like that meme energy of that thing where it's like, woo? I can't replicate it properly, but you know what I mean. I'm sorry. Oops. And we still have the amazing, like the bookshelves, which are basically always fronting as a cover for our conversations that are going on, and like having a room separator basically. On, off. Very nice little detail. She's way too carefree. She is. And then Shinobu's coming on. She's like, what up? Actually, I went frame by frame, by the way, and like, this is not Monogatari. There's no panty shot. Hello? At least we got feet. Right? There you go, people. That being said, very interesting what she's saying here about being able to actually go through Tsukihi, which implies that there is a blood connection. I think I never made that connection in a literal sense. Obviously, I know that Araragi and Tsukihi are siblings, but we always had the Phoenix thing going on. So in my mind, it kind of implied that she is not biologically their sibling, right? Of Karen and of Koyomi, but at the same time, it makes sense if you think about it. She has the Ahoge, and also beyond just this could still be metaphoric, right? This could still be symbolic. But beyond that, we also have the fact that what we're looking at here is probably the Phoenix's soul taking over the body, right? Going into the body of what possibly could be Tsukihi or whatever. It's still grown from Araragi's parents, right? Their basic DNA and whatnot, so it makes sense that she would have blood ties, and that, and as she explains, as a vampire, she can move through the siblings and whatnot. Also implies she could move through Araragi's dad and mom and whatever, right? So very interesting. Might come up at a later point in time in this series. Maybe not with the mom and dad, but maybe with Karen. I can see that. In your face, Yeah. Kisse Shoto Asaro Laorian hot on the blade, yeah. Shinobu Oshino, and she's like panicking and whatnot, but she brought Mr. Donuts, so only 1,080 yen for 10. And she wants them replicated. Of course she wants them replicated, right? All the donuts, every donut, but there's a muffin in there, so alright. Cool. We're drawing, but the fake is not realer than the real thing apparently, and we have a little bit of an accident. Love that. Right here, donuts from a famous franchise store. We all know what it is. Right, and we're talking about like the material creation ability, and she says she can really just put out living things, which is very interesting. So she can also just create matter in a way, but living things are a hard thing to do, although Nadeko can do it, right? Shikigami and whatnot. So I would assume that the Shinobu probably can't create Shikigami, which is a very interesting distinction to make. The window is still being barred because of the shit that happened. Now how about we experiment with the precision instruments next? Yeah, we're experimenting, we're looking, right? And Shinobu is kind of teaching us how to use our powers. I do wonder who has been egging her on. I think I said that at the end of the episode last time, in the main discussion, where I said, hey, look, I wonder if this was Gan being like, hey, Shinobu, can you get over there? Or if Aragi knows about this, or if we have other things going on. Also that poster on the side here, which is like, I think, it looks like kind of a drawing of a famous Japanese shogun or something. She's got a snake around her, much like with will rumors become reality? What about the contents of a magazine? If you draw just the cover, will water become liquid? Right? Things like these. How does it exactly work? Can we make out the rough sketches? Can we find out the limitations? And can we kind of detect the logic within it? Because if we can, then we can use it to our advantage, but also can make sure that things aren't going wrong by us doing something that we hadn't really thought through, and then suddenly it happens not the way we expected to, and it's creating trouble for us. And she's just pretending to be like nonchalant, as Shinobu does as always, right? But she's helping her, she's teaching her to do it. We ate the donuts, we done her stuff. She's kind of making a little reference that we have to like her failing with doing with making minions. That's an ouch, but also a nice little callback to a couple of parts of Monogatari, of the main series or of the previous seasons. And she wants to go, but she's asking that big question. We had that before. I don't want to go too hard through it, but I love this shot here. We do have the big shot of like from the ground, from the ceiling down, where we do see the entire picture, and we're kind of looking down at it. But there is one thing that's separating Shinobu and Nadeko here, which is the shelves. Again, we use the shelves very much as a tool to represent how characters stand to one another. If one is represented on one side of the shelf and the other is represented on the other side, it kind of creates that divide. The divide in both the space, but also in the metaphorical sense. Are they? Who said that? And she's obviously pretending for a second, like, whatever do you mean? I mean, obviously she does know that she meant her. But for her, that wasn't an important thing, right? It was like, and that's how she expresses that, how Shinobu expresses that, you know, that wasn't really, right? I called you out, yes, but it doesn't mean that much for me in like the grand scheme and sense of things. And this is how she laughs that away and is like, yeah, I know I did it. And if there's ever somebody else who does that, bring them to me. Because that's, yeah. Because that's not true, right? At least it's not true anymore. You are at the point now that I can't say this is true. Talked about that she was more powerful than Shinobu, right? She was a god basically at this point, and she gave all of that up, all of that power, all of that ability to distance herself from human desires and human stupidity and whatnot, right? Her holy shit, she's so much bigger than Shinobu. It's insane. Anyway, yeah, all of that. She gave that up to live this to live a grand life to this day like you're doing now. And she's saying you're living a grand life, right? You're doing something great. You're developing. You're being someone that is to be respected, that people can look onto and be like, hey, I'm impressed by what you've lived through. In her own ways, in her own words, obviously. The greatest hate springs from the greatest love. That's a big sentence, honestly. That's a really big sentence. It's very interesting because partially I don't agree, right? Hate and love are different things, definitely different things. One can go into the other, definitely. And you can possibly hate because you love and that love doesn't turn out the way you want to. You can do a lot about that, and it's certainly emotions that are very tied to one another, but I wouldn't say that love comes out of hate or hate comes out of love, necessarily. But I guess one does not exist without the other, and that's what she means. Flicking her off, what the fuck? She feels very small in this frame, right? You look at that. She feels very small in that frame, being put back in her place, but not in a bad way, right? Not in a like, I show you what's what kind of way, but in a way of like, don't you think it's kind of silly? You were putting so much weight onto that, right? It's kind of, but also it's a way to brush her back and be like, Shinobu, like, hell, keeping people at a distance and not showing exactly what your heart says, because Shinobu's never been one to be actually being really, like, being absolutely real with people. She always has to kind of go through that kind of attitude, right? She's always giving attitude in a way to keep people away from her, even if she's gonna let shine through what she really thinks, what she really feels about stuff. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but someone like you, even if you're reincarnated 100 times, I'm sure you'll be a hateful individual. What I think this actually means, right, in the metaphorical sense, especially since 2 sentences ago she actually said the greatest hate comes from the greatest love and whatnot, is I think wherever you may go in life, whether you die or not, you're being reincarnated, whatever, as long as you're you, you'll always have the capacity to love, right? Because she connected hate and love, and then a couple of 2 sentences later, she's like, even if you're reincarnated 100 times, I'm sure you'll be a hateful individual, which also means you'll be an individual full of love as well, with that connection that she just made. She'll shadow. And this is how Nadeko understood it, right? You really do say devastating things, but she's actually picked it up the right way. And everything is kind of bright and shiny with the sunshine and glittering. And then Ononoki coming in. And I do love how much the two of them like each other at this point. And we're roped into the Garn scheme. We're roped in. It's a job that should definitely help with you. I love how she's mentioning a job and then we see the fisheye lens zoom in on her, like almost like she's really afraid of that. She's like, oh no, I don't know if I like that. But yeah. And Ononoki kind of playing the tune by saying, oh, I love that shot. That's so cute. Like balancing the ice and then throwing it up, and just the comic book style for a second there. We do have the sort of the loose one. You put value in your calmness when dealing with trouble, which is very important. I mean, Gon always looking for players that she can use in her schemes and whenever something is going on, and I guess she'll take, like Nadeko will take over a role very akin to Ononoki or even Episode that we've seen here and there, to just be a pawn that you can use whenever something comes up. And I guess Nadeko especially would be very useful when it comes to dealing with younger people, right? Because she's in the younger generation. When it comes to a non-lethal solution, having somebody who has the intelligence, the tact to actually make things happen, not in a devastating way, but actually have some clever schemes that you can employ. Somebody who doesn't have a lot of collateral damage. Somebody who can actually now maybe deal with her powers properly. For Shikigami control, you could say your competence stands out more than any genius would. And she's like, yeah, I'm only nice to you because you're useful, but Nadeko, she understands, it's just kind of just joking around. Like, I don't know about this ice cream thing. I said it last time. She's biting into it so sensually, like, holy shit, what the fuck? The fuck? Maybe she just likes the ice cream. It's fine. Yeah. And we talk about like this is your path to the future, right? This is your third wheel kind of thing, yeah, right? Manga is your mainstay. And then you have your second option, which is going to school normally and getting your shit done. I assume this is kind of within that thing and Nadeko actually wants to do it, go to school and whatnot. I don't know, maybe she doesn't, but I think that's the case. And then we have the third thing, which is like, you can do that too and maybe kind of earn your keep, right? And she says it's kind of like, you could look at it like collecting. In this case, I think collecting stories for her mangas to inspire her, right? To get her to the point where she's like, hey, I have interesting stories to tell. I went through shit. I mean, she already does, but it's more material, right? Didn't think that would be the kind of punchline would be waiting for me. Never thought it would be like this when a snake entwined and possessed me, right? All the way back in Monogatari and Nadeko Snake. And we look at Ophiuchus, or Ophiuchus, which is I looked at it, I looked it up, and it's right here. Ophiuchus is a large constellation straddling the celestial equator. Its name comes from the ancient Greek meaning serpent bearer. Well, here we do have the connection, right? Serpent bearer. And it is commonly represented as a man grasping a snake. The serpent is represented by the constellation Serpens. Ophiuchus was one of the 48 constellations listed by the 2nd century astronomer Ptolemy, and it remains one of the 88 modern constellations. An old alternative name for the constellation was Serpentarius. Very interesting, very cool. We do have some pictures right here, like some ancient pictures like depicting it, the serpent bearer, and we do have the ox on the side. I think Hercules is kind of the mirror of that. I wonder if there's some kind of interpretation that we could put into that, if that got also included, right? Hercules has a lot of history in Greek mythology, so I wonder if that ever comes up. Right here, Hercules and Serpentarius, or Ophiuchus. Here we have, and this is actually the picture if we look at like an actual sky picture of it to the right side here, right in the right hand corner, surrounded by a blue cloud is I think the main, or blue clouds is the main cluster of that one, which, and this like this kind of dark blackish brown thing over here on the left side is I think an arm of the Milky Way. So this is really cool to actually see that in action for once. But yeah, really, really cool. We do have another nod to serpents. She's bearing the serpent. She did bear the serpent. The serpent is part of her at this point, right? It's not like it's gone. She just gave up on it, more or less. Maybe she's bearing the serpent forever, in a way, you would say. And the heritage of that is her ability to draw these things and put them into the world. Although maybe there could be another meaning for that as well. She thought class slippers, right, which is Aragi and whatnot. Been told that for someone who is always looking down, I'm neglectful of my own feet. Do wonder what that means. It would be really cool if somebody actually told me that. I can't quite make that out. I think it's interesting. Maybe in a way you could interpret that in a way that you say you're always looking down and you're not looking ahead, and what you're neglectful of is where your own feet are going, right? Where they're taking you. The road you take, basically. Shout out Koyumi Road. We do have this scene, which is very interesting, mainly because apparently, and I didn't know that, so shout out to the people who've actually pointed that out. I think it was Amar in one of the Discord, in the Pink Cube Discord maybe. This has a mirror in episode 12 of Bakemonogatari, where right here, where Sendugahara lies here, and she's like looking over, she's about to kiss Araragi, and Araragi is on the other side, and we're looking at the stars, right? In this case, it's that very tinted very green, and the song plays, right? I don't remember how it is. Daneb, whatever, Altair and Vega, right? The famous summer here we go. The famous summer triangle, which is Daneb, Altair, and Vega. At least that's how it's called in Japan. And we do have that mirror shot of like us looking at one another, right? Two of them. And we do have that mirrored in this shot where Onoroki is looking at Nadeko, and she's making her yay piece thing, and Nadeko is kind of almost forced grinning in a way. And looking back at her, kind of like very insecure about all of this, but it feels like maybe is this a new ship? Is this a shippable moment? Is that what it is? Because it feels very much like it, with mirroring Araragi and Sendugahara here. She's like, maybe I don't have the subtitle activated, but maybe this also is superfluous, that she's wearing the two heads of being a manga artist, possibly a future one, and a specialist. Yeah, maybe it's too much, Nadeko. Maybe it is, but maybe it also isn't. Maybe this is just the beginning of you becoming who you were always meant to be. Or who you could always be, right? The potential that you had within you. I think that's great. That's just great. I literally downloaded Bakemonogatari episode 12 just to show you this, because I've found it so fucking cool that we mirror that, and it has to mean something if we actually mirror a shot like that. Although, I mean, thinking about it, no. I mean, like, this was Tsubasa Cat, which was way away from like the first arc that we had of Monogatari, so it can't be just first arc mirror. This is a deliberate mirror of like meaning within the scene, so could mean something very interesting down the line. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the beginning discussion. What we can actually do is take a tiny quick look into a couple of comments that we had on the final episode of Monogatari. I think I'd like to highlight that, because mainly we're talking about it right now, and we're probably not gonna talk about it for the next couple of weeks when we get into a new arc or whatnot. We have a couple of things. Let me just read through some of them. I actually read them all, but I'll just reread them to get somewhat of an idea of that, and then we'll come back and I'll actually talk about them a little bit. All right, let's actually go through it a little bit. Some very interesting comments here. Alexander Henriquez writes, Vrinchpink is a type of flower that appears in the live action footage at the beginning of the arc and also at the end, with the 5 Nadeko standing side by side in the flower field. Yeah, I actually peeked the flower field, but I didn't know it was like, or I didn't remember it was in the beginning of the arc as well. Amazing foreshadowing on a visual level, as always, right? We expect as much of Shaft. We also have like generally love how Kami was built up as this massive boss fight in the previous episode, only for her to be dealt with before the opening credits. Yeah, this is like the typical fashion. I remember the coming soon, right, of the Nadeko boss fight that we had going on in her head, and then it didn't happen in the end. That was cool too. Exactly, and I proceeded to read the light novel, and Nadeko just insulted the heck out of Kami Nadeko, saying she had destroyed her remaining brain cells when she was Kami Nadeko. It's true though, right? It's fucking true. What, like, the main thing about Kami Nadeko was that she wanted to get away from all that was bothering her as a human being. That means that she can be hopelessly naive, she can have as much fun as she wants. She gets prayed to, whatever, as a god, right? She has that power. She doesn't need to care about all of these things, so she doesn't need to think either. But it's very funny that this is what, maybe also it's kind of a nod at that sometimes love makes us dumb. It can be, right? It can make us dumb sometimes. So that is also one thing we could put, right? We could project into that if you want to. Thank you, Nitro and Starpeep, for that. We do also have the Nadeko, which is still kind of eluding me on some level. In both Chinese and Japanese, ko is usually referring to a male who has status and respectful and somewhat a bit of an old image, I guess, right? I guess that's what Dokyev meant. Yeah. I guess what's bothering her is maybe that she actually, right, is into her and doesn't like to be called that, or maybe it bugs her on some other level. Not something I quite understand. Shinobu's line, "The greatest hate springs from the greatest love," is a proverb that seems to be somewhat known in several different countries, including Japan, according to Googling. Yeah, okay, nice that we have that here. I just mentioned it when I was like, please explain it to me. I mean, I kind of went into trying to analyze it to a degree, but it's nice to see that people are kind of on the same page with me when it comes to that. On reflection, while it might seem like Shinobu is taking a jab at Nadeko, I actually think it's an attempt at reconciliation. Through the proverb, Shinobu is acknowledging that the reason God Nadeko was really, really psycho was because Meek Nadeko really, really loved Aragi. Shinobu isn't known for her even keel emotions either, can relate on several levels, I think. Also, the first word of the proverb is, its Japanese form is literally kawaii. So I think it also, yeah, pun wordplay of like Nadeko being cute. That makes sense. And also, like I said, if the greatest hate springs from the greatest love, her saying that she will always be capable of hate, right? No matter if she's reincarnated or whatnot, it means you'll always be capable of love as well, right? There's always gonna be love there, which is kind of a nod to last episode's conclusion, where we told Meek Nadeko, don't worry, I won't forget falling in love and actually this being my whole world and all of that. I won't learn from that mistake, and I will do it again. And it will be wonderful again, I guess. Yeah. It's great that Nadeko has grown up. The second Shikigami was Wrath Nadeko kicking and hitting the spear. Yes, I didn't know that it was actually Wrath Nadeko, but it makes perfect sense, right? With the supernatural physical power and whatnot. That means actually current Nadeko died first. What the fuck? I mean, I guess it was a copy, and that's all it was, and current Nadeko wasn't as developed yet. I think it was different. Was interesting how differently Yotsuge acted towards Nadeko in this arc compared to how we've seen Yotsuge previously. Here, Yotsuge is exceptionally supportive, constantly reaffirming, generally complimentary towards Nadeko through their adventures. All stark contrast in how she treats Aragi when they went on oddity missions in past seasons. The show even addresses this in episode 3 of the arc, suggesting that Yotsuge is affected by people around her, and therefore she's simply mirroring Nadeko's kindness. Interesting. Yeah, but wouldn't she, like, did she then mirror Aragi's behavior, right? His maybe tsunness in a way, right? His way to kind of just excuse helping by finding a reason to put forward that is not him just being self-sacrificial and whatnot. And then I thought about Ogi was cooperative, helpful, and deferential to Nadeko, the polar opposite of the old Ogi we know, and way less of a dick than the Ogi Kanbaru experienced in Hana. Interesting. And I thought about Shinobu, who has every reason to hold a grudge against Nadeko due to her monster fighting precoi, but instead she's helpful, supportive, sympathetic, which is kind of insane because Shinobu basically doesn't acknowledge any humans not named Araragi. Interesting. A meta explanation would be that Nadeko draw is told from Nadeko's point of view, and so the character directions reflect Nadeko's perspective. Definitely something to weigh into that. And perhaps she internally softens their rougher edges, or perhaps her latent cuteness draws them in, even when Nadeko doesn't do it consciously. Or, this is my theory, perhaps by maturing a little, Nadeko has become a bit more of an interesting person, one whose story is finally worth of attention and praise. Any manga artist would be thrilled if that were the case. Yeah, I wrote something on that. I said, I wonder how much independent emotion preference Yotsuki can show as a Shikigami, because it feels like she was and is rather fond of Nadeko. Really cool aspect that we've seen throughout this entire arc. She was fond of Araragi too, but in a different way, even mentioned empathizing and wanting to help people like Araragi and Nadeko in the beginning of the arc. And yes, this could definitely be Nadeko's influence on her, as oddities are affected by people around them, especially those knowing about and perceiving them, which all of them, Ononoki, Ogi, Shinobu, are oddities, so they could all be affected by who they interact with, who they help. There's definitely a lot to be said about that. I did have an interesting theory as well by I think Alexander Henriquez, when we talked about Ogi's involvement in everything. He writes, I might as well share my whole theory on Ogi post-Soku so you have a better idea of where I'm coming from. Have you ever wondered why Ogi identifies as a male after Sokobari? Most people think she's just trolling, trying to gaslight and throw people off, but I think the answer lies in Soku itself. In it, we learned that Araragi has a lot of regrets concerning how he dealt with some of the girls, and two regrets in particular stand out. Not being able to cure Kanbaru's arm. Ogi was involved in that. And the whole situation with Nadeko. Now, isn't it weird that two things that a male presenting Ogi riding a bike, looking like Araragi does, is basically kickstart Kanbaru's quest of ridding herself of the devil's arm and now helping Nadeko face herself get over Araragi. A bunch of people go so far as to think that Araragi lent Ogi's car to help Nadeko, but personally I think it's much more conceptual and indirect. The male representing Ogi is the metaphorical pass of the torch from Araragi to Ogi. In Soku, during the last confrontation, they said explicitly, I clean after you and you clean after me. So yeah, I think Ogi is trying to clean up after Araragi, and that's why he helps Nadeko in his own way. He took over those regrets from Araragi and is addressing them. Perfectly reasonable in my opinion. My answer to that was, I'm sorry if I'm reading this, but it's easier to kind of just, because I already formed the opinion and I kind of put it aside, right? My main thought process with male Ogi was always just, of course, now that we know Ogi's origin, it makes sense for Ogi to accept and reconciliate with current Araragi and become male, right? Because we do have that identity threat. But what you're saying feels more coherent. Not that I'm genuinely wrong, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Ogi is an oddity, and even though the world acknowledges her/him as Oshino's niece or nephew, they still remain an oddity at the core. And the core of her existence was representing and acting upon Araragi's regrets and his inner criticism. If the lingering feeling of having not been able to resolve Nadeko and Kanbaru's troubles completely are two of the things he regrets the most, it makes sense Ogi would act in a way as to make sure these are resolved eventually. It also makes sense that they are more of a passenger and a passive assistance here, because this is the exact opposite of what Araragi has done in the past, especially in those two cases of Suruga Devil as well as Nadeko Snake/Medusa. In both of these, he tried to involve himself way too much, right? And he made things worse and worse. So Ogi's approach of actually going there and being like, oh yeah, you do your own thing, right? You have to find everything out on your own, but I can transport you, I can assist you, I can kind of emotionally support you and give you the nod that you need to actually go in the direction you want to go in, right? Or give yourself the push to actually do the thing that you're kind of struggling to get started, is in exact opposition of what Araragi was doing in all of these, right? Suruga Devil, Nadeko Snake/Medusa, where he put himself directly into the line and tried to solve it himself instead of trying to let the people resolve the issues themselves. And maybe that is kind of at the core of the problem he had with actually resolving these two specific issues. In Kanbaru's sense, I do remember that very vividly because I just recently watched Autosave's reaction to the entire Suruga monkey arc. In that specifically, he actually went and wanted to sacrifice himself in order for her to get rid of the arm, right? That was his direct self-sacrifice trying to get in. The same or something similar, not exactly the same, but something similar happened to Nadeko Snake, where he tried to solve it through like ritual and whatnot and tried to get that out, and it didn't work, right? The thing was never truly resolved, and then we evolved into Nadeko Medusa, where in the end he was up against an opponent, but threw himself continuously against them and was willing to actually eventually die for good right? Or keep dying forever. Keep dying forever until he got that solved. Which also didn't mean anything, and the end result of it was Aragi, stay the fuck away, let Kaiki / Hitagi and all of the other ones handle this, because you can literally not do anything here, you messed this up. And maybe, if this would have turned out differently in the beginning, if he would have been more like Ogi is in this specific arc, or in Kanbaru's arc, then maybe this wouldn't have been one of the, these wouldn't have been arcs where he wasn't able to actually solve something and left regrets. But yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. It makes perfect sense. Really cool comments. With that being said, I would say I'll drink something and then we'll get into the main half episode or whatever it's gonna be. So, see you there. All right, we are back and I have the episode ready to go. Over here we do have some, I don't know if this is actually gonna go into focus. Let me see. We do have some nice Dr. P cherry for us to enjoy. I've been drinking those a little bit much lately. Let me see if it's actually, I hope it's not gonna explode on me. Oh yeah, nice. That was a nice sound. I've been drinking those a lot lately. I need to kind of lay off them at some point in time. But for now, take a sip, take a sip. You're the sizzling. Yeah. Oh, yes. And let's get ourselves into the episode, right? Episode 7-ish, but actually 6.5 of Monogatari starts in a 3, a 2, a 1. Bam. Ooh. Story I'm about to tell you know it really happened about 600 years. Oh, Shinobu, what? I'd like to listen as if it was fiction because it happened too far in the past to sound realistic. A myth. Better off left as a lie, with no morals or salvation. Ooh. This looks like a fairy tale book. Wait, who's narrating this? It doesn't sound like... kiss shot.
彼女の肖像画が飾られているほどでした。老若男女、貴賤を問わず、誰もが彼女に魅了されました。
Queen, basically.
その美しさだけで皇帝陛下から称号を贈られた彼女は、全国民から美しい姫、
princess.
愛されていました。
I don't know how real that love would be,
噂
but...
に聞くその姿を一目見ようと、国民は彼女の住まうお城へと長蛇の列を作り、
We had that in Soku, right?
毎日お城の前にプレゼントの山が築かれるのでした。
The presents are higher than the wall.
美しさを曲にしました。どうぞお納めください。
We don't have any music
音
either.
楽家はそう言ってバイオリンを引き上げました。ひい様の美しさを詩にしました。どうぞお納めください。
They just talk about her beauty.
そう言って高らかに読み上げました。
What?
ひい様の美しさを彫像にしました。
What's the person behind that, right?
お納めください。芸術家はそう言って100体の像を彫り上げました。だけど、どんな贈り物もお姫様を笑顔にはしませんでした。
Because they don't look at her as a person, right?
私を見てくれない。
At the real Mia.
部屋で一人嘆きました。美しい美しいと褒めそやしてくれるけれど、
Yeah.
それ以上何も言ってくれない。私がどういう人間なのか。
There's no substance.
何も知らない。
Oh, I love that, right? With the cutout.
中身を知らない。それが美し姫の悩みなのでした。彼女が何をしても、何を話しても、感想はいつも美しいの一言。 成功しても失敗しても、いいことをしても悪いことをしても、評価はいつも同じでした。
No
何を
difference.
しても美しい。寝ても覚めても美しい。美し姫とはよく言ったものです。
No, this goes hand in hand with like the
まるで
Nautical thematic,
魔性
doesn't
で
it?
はありませんか。これじゃあ私には意志なんてあってもなくても同じじゃない。私は私の見てくれの奴隷じゃないのよ。たまたま生まれついた美しさなんて邪魔にしかならないわ。私は外見じゃなく、
Shackles.
もっと内面を見てほしい。己の美しさに甘えないこの立派な志に胸を打たれたのが、この国に古くから暮らしていた魔女のおばあさんでした。美しい姫、お前の美貌を誰にも見えない透明色にしてあげる。
So transparent.
代わり、お前の心が周りのみんなに見えるようにしてあげようね。
Okay.
これからはお前の内面が問われることになるんだよ。
Interesting.
魔女のおばあさんが呪文を唱えて杖を振るうと、透き通るようだったお姫様の肌が本当に透き通りました。ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。美し姫は心から感謝しました。外見の美しさが取り払われ、さらされたお姫様の心の美しさはそれまでの比ではありませんでした。その輝きはお城にいながらにして国の隅々まで行き渡り、
Sorry, I'm not talking much.
お姫様の父親はずっと見えていなかった娘の心のあまりの美しさに己を恥じ、朝挨拶をした次の瞬間、バルコニーから飛び降りて自らを罰しました。
And to punish her as well?
お姫様の
Oh, selfish.
母親はこうも立派な心持ちの娘を産んだことを誇りに思い、それだけで人としてこの世に生を受けた自分の役割は終わったとばかりに、朝食を食べた後、安らかに息を引き取りました。
This is like Hanekawa thematic now.
美し姫の優しさを曲ではとても表現できないと思った音楽家は、それに釣り合う贈り物として自分の一番大切なもの、命よりも大切なもの、すなわち楽器を弾くための両手首を切り落としてお姫様に捧げました。
They're going crazy, holy shit.
美し姫の賢さを詩ではとても表現できないと思った詩人は、それに釣り合う贈り物として自分の一番大切なもの、命よりも大切なもの、すなわち詩を読み上げるための力を引きちぎって
Bro, just
お姫
fucking.
様に捧げました。美し姫の勇敢さを彫像ではとても表現できないと思った芸術家は、それに釣り合う贈り物として自分の一番大切なもの、命よりも大切なもの、
His eyes, alright.
素材を見極めるための目をくり抜いてお姫様に捧げました。国民は皆それまで大切にしていたお姫様の肖像画を火にくべました。なんてつまらないものを御所を大事に飾っていたのだろうと思いました。心ならずもこんなものでは全く釣り合わないと思いながらも、自分の命、親兄弟の命、子供の命、孫の命、
This is like Vlad the Impaler style, right? But not the fault of whatever's at the center.
死体の山がお城の高さを越えるのにはそんなに時間はかかりませんでした。ああ、なんて悲劇。こんなことになるなんて。自らの心のありように捧げられた死産血牙に絶望し、お姫様は魔法を解いてもらおうと魔女のおばあさんを訪ねました。しかし
Why didn't she look earlier?
一番最初にお姫様の内面に接していた魔女のおばあさんは、命よりも大切な長年培った知識の詰まった頭をお姫様に捧げていたのです。おばあさんの生首を前にお姫様は泣き崩れました。
Alone in the world.
そんな哀れを誘う姿が、他人のために涙を流す美しい心が ますます国民を魅了しました。
Whoever was left.
我先にと競って自分の命を、あるいは命よりも大切なものをお姫様に捧げました。お姫様を慰めるために次から次に笑顔でその身を投げ打ちました。築かれた死体の山、いやさ死体のお城は無論悪名をもって王都や隣国にまで轟きましたが、しかし駆けつける軍隊も直近に美し姫の意向を
Of her lives, right? Got enchanted.
その死体のお城の一部になり、
Holy fuck, dude.
もういや、みんな死んでしまう。なのに私には誰も助けることができない。私が何かすればするほど、何か話せば話すほど、みんな死んでしまう。
Is she trying to die?
私も死んでしまいたい。だけど死ぬことはできませんでした。
Why?
お姫様の心の強さがそれを許しませんでした。お姫様は狂うこともできませんでした。だったら旅に出なさいと、そこでおばあさんの生首がしゃべりました。
The head is still alive. What the fuck? Kill it with fire.
涙が奇跡を起こしたのです。ほんの一瞬だけおばあさんは生き返りました。魔性をも超えるお前の心の美しさのために死んでしまう者をいつかは助けられるかもしれない。その時までお前は人々から離れ続けなさい。
Total isolation,
誰
right?
とも寄り添わず一人で生きなさい。そう言っておばあさんは再び息を引き取りました。こうして血の色で真っ赤に染まったお城と死体で築かれたお城を離れて、美し姫は終わりなき旅に出たのでした。魔女のおばあさんの呪いのような忠告に従って、これ以上誰も死なせないために、誰とも同道できないたった一人の逃避行。彼女が吸血鬼になるのはこれよりもう少し後のことなのですが、お姫様のキスショットアセロラオリオンハートアンダーブレードの赤き血にまみれた吸血鬼伝説は、
The origins.
次第です。そして心清らかな彼女が己に捧げられたちっぽけな命を初めて助けることができたのが、これより600年後の出来事なのでした。
Yeah. And that is, well, not Aragi, right? It's one other person, although, right? The first, I would say. And we hear Undead again. Undead might even fit for this one as well, right? Maybe not with like the beat we have. I remember like the old Shinobu intros, they were more, right, opera. Second verse? Sounds like that. Definitely. Second verse. Why are second verses always better than the first one? In my opinion. Most of the time. All right. I mean, I guess that's it. You know what? It's really hot in here. And thankfully it has not been distracting me too much. I'm gonna look over it. But in the meantime, I'll open the windows and I'll make a short little pause, and then we'll be right back, and we'll be gonna look a little bit into it. We probably don't have to analyze too much, right? There's not a lot of art going on. We had a very nice little art style basically going for us. Not a lot of music, not a lot of different shots or whatever, but we have a little bit of meaning to go into. A lot of which has been alluded to in the past, right? Even before Off&Monster season, but cool stuff nonetheless, and probably something that prepares us for what is to come, right, in this next arc. So, or maybe the arc after, we don't know, right? This could be a look at the story, and then we have another arc, and then there comes the second part of the story, which is how did she become a vampire? Hello? We don't know that either. Exactly. So, see you soon. Welcome back to Monogatari. We are going to look a little bit into this fable, this story, right? Very cool that we have this little... This almost reminds me like the old intros of the Shinobu episodes, right? Shinobu Mail or whatever else we had in Monogatari. I don't remember the other Shinobu arc, the name of the other Shinobu arc. But we do have that preface with, but I'd like you to listen to as if it was fiction because it happened too far in the past to sound realistic. And a story like this with no morals or salvation is better off left alive, right? We say the story is too grim, right? It doesn't have any moral to come out of, any conclusion that kind of gives us closure. It's just a left open story that was all about having incredible beauty on the outside and the inside. People getting mad at that, right? The princess was sick of just being praised endlessly, right? And worshipped and whatever. The problem was when she wished for her inside to be seen, right? One of the options could be that she was so ugly on the inside that people would banish her from the kingdom, but that wasn't the case. She was so enchanting, she was so beautiful on the inside as well as a person, cared so much and all of that. Well, that's the underlying theme, because beautiful on the inside often means you're very caring, very maybe self-sacrificial as well, right? Very nice to everybody. So much so brilliant as well, right? So intelligent, so far above everybody else, god status basically, that people would turn mad at the sight of you. And this is kind of almost a curse, right? It was a curse when it started out, and it became a curse even more so when the inside was made visible. It's kind of very interesting because it reminds me of like in the beginning of this fable of the story, and this is how it's made up, almost like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows or some other shows like that, Nightmare Before Christmas, whatever you want to do, right? There's a lot of shows that are kind of fable-like, where you do have these cutouts that are almost like puppet play things that you would show at a theater, like not a theater, but like at a little puppet theater or light and shadow theater back in the day. Cutout forms that just give shape to our fantasy, not too much texture, not too much to actually put into, although obviously with the visuals of the show we have a lot to enhance that. The background is beautiful with the flowers and whatnot, right? We do want to set that up, and as soon as this starts we obviously know it's about Shinobu, because we know that in Sokowari she was actually that kind of person, and she also had that enchanting thing, right? Because like she couldn't see anybody, and then she opened the veil, and Aragi almost got dragged in into that. Yeah, it got alluded to, right? So we immediately knew that that was Shinobu actually that we're talking about. But we're spinning the stories with floral patterns on the dress and florals behind, and we show all of this scenery, which is really, really beautiful. I think this is a cool way to actually have some animation, some original animation going without having to spend as much time and budget on an entire episode, right? Have that built in, because this is something that, in my opinion, or that probably is like an in-between interlude chapter in the light novel, I would assume. I know that I only know that from ReZero, where we have these small interlude light novels which kind of sometimes show some stuff that is happening in the grand world that is not directly connected to our plot, and it's like, oh, intriguing, is this gonna come up at some point? And this is likewise right here, right? We're telling this fable, this story, and we're not supposed to believe that. We're saying, like, take it as fiction. Why? Because this is larger than life. This is a lot of these circumstances that are happening are so far into the extreme, right? So far into the supernatural and weird and like just fable-like, right? Because fables are often a very simplified, over-exaggerated version of events that are supposed to be displayed in a certain way as to make way for a red thread that is going through them and a moral that we want to tell our readers. And in the same sense, this is a story that this story is told like this. The problem is that we don't have a moral at the end. The problem is that we don't have a conclusion at the end. We need a continuation after that. I wonder if it's going to be as fable-like as this, or if we move to yet another way to present something, because the next story, which is how, I assume, how Shinobu became a vampire, like how Kissshot became a vampire, is not as fable-like, right? But one thing I like that reflected a lot in me is when we talked about like her enchanting nature and all of that, and like, I mean, obviously this art style is really cool because it reminds me also a lot of Madoka and witches and whatnot, right? It's all within the theme, right? Witches and the fantastical and like these environments and how they're set up, kind of like the witches' labyrinth and whatnot. But even beyond that, like when we come to the place where her true beauty shines through, and suddenly the father jumps and the mother's like, my life's purpose is fulfilled and all of that. By the way, very, very self-centered. If you think that what you're doing right here is not affecting the person who you're doing it for, supposedly, right? Oh, I've done something terrible. Let me atone for it by taking my own life, and as such creating all of that sadness and anger and anguish within the people who loved me. Hello, what? But it makes sense. It is kind of very in line with historic Japanese culture, right? Seppuku, all of these things. That was a big thing, right? Where people destroyed their... Well, I don't know how much it was. I only can say that from the stories I've read, right? And I do know seppuku culture kind of existed, and I do know that in Japan, like the unaliving yourself thing is a little bit bigger than in some other countries. I know honor, right? And the way you are perceived by other people means a lot more in Japan as opposed to many other societies. But I do know it's been a real thing that entire bloodlines were wiped out because somebody has, I don't know, done something stupid and rash, made a mistake, or disrespected somebody who was very, very respected. And as a result, they took their own lives and their families, right? Even their newborns and whatnot. And it's insane, right? I'm gonna end my family line because I've insulted this guy who was like a big hero of a country. Hello? But yeah, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense in the story right here. With like what we have, who made the story, right? Nishio Isin, who himself is a Japanese person. He understands that man, as it goes into that. But even then, we did, like when we talked about the enchanting personality of Kissshot, I thought that back in the day when I was watching Soku as well. But even now, it kind of came up. It flashed into my mind this scene in Kisu Monogatari in the beginning, when Araragi is going down the escalator to the subway station, and he meets Shinobu, right? He meets Kissshot, completely devastated, and he's refusing to help her and goes away, and suddenly you do hear this static noise going. I mean, even before that, you've seen that with the Morse code and whatnot, but he goes back up, and suddenly you hear like her screaming for him to come back, and while she's screaming, you hear a baby crying, and it feels like this is kind of this unnatural thing that is drawing him back in, right? Almost like it's not a sweet whisper, but like a baby crying instinctively in most humans is gonna trigger a kind of an instinct to protect it, right? An instinct to do something immediately. It's incredibly unbearable to hear a baby crying, even if you, well, not incredibly unbearable in some cases, right? Because you know the mother's right there or whatever, right? You're gonna be annoyed or whatever. But it's very uncomfortable to hear them crying, and one of the reasons is not that their cry would be incredibly like shrill. It is sometimes, but mostly I do feel it's because like a baby crying is instinctively to us very uncomfortable, and it is meant that way because we are primed to actually react to that and make sure they're not crying anymore. And that is like not the same kind of enchantment, but also kind of, right? People being driven to madness by somebody's presence, by their will, by whatever they relay onto you, right? When they speak to you and you're entranced, when you forget to breathe when you're close to them. Shout out to ReZero once again. That is, if you know, you know. Yeah, really cool. The atmosphere is very well set up. And I do love this, like I highlighted the shot in the reaction because like we have the hair going up, much like we had in last episode, Shinobu's hair hanging from the ceiling, but also we had seen similar shots of Kissshot in her prime form, right? In Kisu and whatnot. The witch coming back to life? Hell no. Kill it with fire. What the fuck? If the witch is coming back to life, there's something wrong, right? The poor witch dying and taking her own head, but holy shit, there was something cursed and unholy about her if her head can come back to life just like that. Although, one might say that this is very much in line with what possibly could be indirectly Kissshot Acerola Orion Hard Under Plate's powers. These days, as a vampire, right? But maybe even before being a vampire, she was already kind of an oddity. And maybe that exactly is what makes her the king of oddities. Who knows? We don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you know. Yeah, entire kingdoms coming there and just killing themselves in the presence, right? Trying to rid the world of this evil and then succumbing to it, kind of. Would be a while longer yet before she turns into a vampire. But the vampiric tale of the princess of Kissshot, Acerola Orion Heart on a Blade, covered in red blood, had started here, and her innocent soul finally saves a tiny life offered to her for the first time, in an incident roughly 600 years later. I do wonder which incident we're relaying here, because we know she saved Aragi's life, right? She saved it or spared it, right? No, she spared it first, creating a minion. She also saved it afterwards when he jumped into the fire, right? Although I don't know if he would have died for good, right? We know that her bloodline is special and wouldn't have perished maybe and would have just suffered for eternity. And she saved the first, right? The first oddity hunter's life. So I do wonder which one we're talking about. Or if we're maybe not talking about either, and this is basically a foreshadowing for whatever arc is about to come. Like how we define that, because this is always a little bit vague in what we can define. Maybe you in the comments can actually clear that up for me and be like, oh, actually, she didn't, or actually, she did here, right? This was the first technically, whatever. Love that portrait, it's really cool. And the way they spin, like they put down the kanji and whatnot. A really neat episode. And we do have that second verse of, actually this is the last thing I want to do. I'm gonna look into the second verse of Undead. Alright, I don't know if these are well translated, but we'll look into them. This is the first right? How ironic, nonsense, blah 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 blah. Strange fantasy, past and future can't change the past. And then we go into the second verse, right? Cut in, why does it feel like there's no hope for the future? I can't expect anything, feeling like I've been living for a long time. Tired of deja vu and templates. No sign of wonderful events. This sounds very Shinobu. Regretful, the karma of accumulated experiences. Mythology that has become a formality. Alright. Mythology that has become a formality, right? It's almost like there's no value in it, right? There's no actual function in it. It's just because it's always been that way. Tradition, in a way. Formality. And boring evolution. All I want is stimulation. I'm bored, I'm used to it. How guidance that's getting organized, increasing compliance seems to be closing. Sucking it dry, vampire. All of it tastes the same, undead. Right, all of the blood tastes the same. Not that you and your chain in any era, the past, the future, they're all in the present. Fulfill the act of living, aim for a happy ending. Right, that is the ultimate goal, right? And she never found it. And she's just become numb to it in a way, Shinobu, if you want to put it that way. Not that, I'm telling you, don't give up on happiness. Be human, just getting used to suffering, just enduring is as good as that. An undead corpse, period. Unhappy, children troubled, unlucky, those who don't become people. We have a lot of these, right? Shikigami, Nadeko in a way, but she became human, right? That is kind of maybe even a point of envy for Shinobu. Be happy, aim without slack. Undead, you're alive. Whether soaking in unhappiness or becoming happy, it's all you. Throughout the ages, everything, all things in the universe. Peace, peace. Past and future can't change the past. Yeah, we do have that little interlude, right? Where there are people, there's always something to worry about. Survive in this story full of monsters. A constant theme of survival, but then of what it means to survive, right? Because living without, right? Living just taking it, living not striving to be happy is as good as being dead. But at the same time, you're still alive, so you have to endure it. Which is very interesting how we spin this. And all of these things through the ages and past, the future, they're all in the present, right? The endlessly repeating cycle. This is all Shinobu, I think. At least we can kind of interpret it this way. So it's really cool that we have the second/third. I don't know if there's a third verse, but it could just be a long second verse of the song Undead, actually maybe applying to the next arc as well. That would be really cool. Right, that was me talking about Monogatari, basically. This will all be in one video, I think. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave me a like and subscribe. I'm not saying this enough these days, but I also don't want to annoy you with it. Check out the Discord, check out the Patreon and all of the stuff I got there. Monster, Technolize, whatever you want, right? Technolize, not yet. Jujutsu Kaisen just dropped 2 episodes. There should be 1 at least, maybe 2 more within this month. And other than that, I do hope you'll have a wonderful week until I'll be able to see you next time on Monogatari for episode 7 of Monogatari Off&Monster season. See you then.